Welcome back. In the last episode, we defeated Eikthyr. Now it's time to hunt down the second boss, the Elder. So without further ado, let's jump into it. The first thing to do after defeating the boss was to see what new upgrades had become available, and spend some time gathering materials to upgrade everything. It turned out Eiktyr's antlers could be used to craft our first pickaxe, which meant we could finally start breaking rocks and mining ore. I had a look at the Valheim wiki. It stated that trolls are very rare, and bears are rare as well. I found that quite funny, considering I managed to find them standing right next to each other quite a few places. My adventure through the Black Forest, I discovered my first burial chamber. Hugin immediately appeared to tell me how important it was, so I decided to take a look inside. There, I found one of my first sterling core. I marked the location on the map and continued to exploring. While traveling around, I also come across some tistil. Somewhere I read that it would be important later on, so I made sure to pick up every piece I found. As I headed back home to see what new recipes the Sterling Core had unlocked, I got into a couple of fights. That's when I came to an important conclusion. Spears are rubbish. The only reason I wanted to use one was for the extra range, but they seem to have almost the same range as an axe. They are just awkward to use and feel a bit pointless. At least getting rid of it gave me an extra inventory slot. Once I got home, I realized I needed 5 sterling cores for the smelter and another 5 for charcoal can. That meant I needed 10 in total. So it was back into the burial chambers. While fighting my way through skeletons, I discovered the location of the Elder Summoning Altar. Slowly but surely, I cleared the chamber, but by the end of it, I had only come away with 4 cores. That meant I still need 6 more. At that point, I didn't even have enough to build one of the crafting station needed for the progress, so it was time to find more burial chambers. Interestingly, right next to the burial chamber, I found a troll cave. There wasn't actually a troll inside, so I figured I might as well loot it while I was there. Then back to exploring. Not long after, I discovered my first copper vein. I had seen a video claiming that if you placed campfires around the copper vein and built yourself a small shelter, the Great Wolf would leave you alone and you could mine in peace. Well, that wasn't exactly my experience. On the first day, it was raining, so the fires were constantly going out. However, I did build a small shelter and a workbench so I could repair my tools. That part was actually very useful. It also provided enough comfort to keep the rested buff active, which made mining much faster. Well, whoever said that great goals won't bother you if you place fires around your mining area was either working with an outdated information or was simply wrong. I spent most of my time mining, then fighting, then mining, then fighting again. It was hard to make any real progress because they just kept coming. They happily walked straight past of the fires, as if they weren't even there. I got the full package as well. Shamans, Brute, regular Great War, sometimes even 1-star version. By the time I finally finished mining, I discovered another problem. Copper is incredibly heavy. I only managed to carry a small amount back to the base before realizing I was going to need a much better way of transporting all of this. Now, back to searching for more burial chambers. And honestly, I'm still not convinced that trolls and bears are actually rare. But at this point, I felt like I was seeing almost as many of them as I was deer. While continuing my search for more chambers, I came across the Grey Dwarf's nest. Grey Dwarfs are incredibly annoying, and they just kept spawning and getting in the way, so eventually I decided it had to go. After another 30 minutes or so of exploring, I finally found my second burial chamber. This one was immediately made me realize how small my first chamber actually been. In a single room alone, I found 7 settling cores. By the time I finished exploring the entire chamber, I had collected 13 cores from that one burial chamber. Now that's more like it. With more than enough cores collected, I headed back home and finally built both the smelter and the charcoal kiln. Of course, Hugin immediately appeared to acknowledge my progress and made sure he was standing directly in my way while doing it. Now we could finally enter the Bronze Age. At last, I could start smelting ore and see what new recipes and upgrades were available. The next job was bringing back all the copper and tin I had left behind. It took a few trips, but on the way, I discovered yet another burial chamber, so I marked it on the map to come back to later. And just for fun, I also found another bear. At this point, finding bears was becoming a normal part of my day. Once I had some copper to work with, I looked onto the wiki and discovered that boars could be tamed. Naturally, I decided that I needed pet pigs. So I built a pen and started trying to lure some boars back home. People weren't joking when they said that the Bronze Age was a grind. Everything suddenly required huge amounts of material. However, I finally unlocked something that looked like it would make my life easier. The cart. Perfect. This thing was going to help me move all the copper back from my mining site. Or at least, that was the plan. While I was crafting and organizing everything, I suddenly received an event that I wasn't prepared for and honestly didn't even know existed. The forest is moving. Apparently, once you defeat the first boss, Grey Dwarfs can start launching attacks against your base. As a game mechanic, I actually think it's pretty cool. It forces you to think about the base defenses and make your home feel like it actually exists in a dangerous world. Unfortunately, this particular letter wasn't great for me. The Grey Dwarfs damaged parts of my house, and even worse, they killed the boars I was trying to tame. At that point, I was considerably less enthusiastic about the feature. After repairing the damage, I started thinking more seriously about how I wanted my base to look in the future and what sort of defenses I would eventually need. Once everything was fixed, it was finally time to test out the cart. This thing immediately got stuck on almost everything. rocks, roots, tiny bumps in the ground. Pretty much anything it could possibly collide with. Still, I kept telling myself it would be worth it if I could bring back huge amount of copper and stone in a single trip. Then I discovered the next problem. If you overload the cart, it becomes incredibly difficult to move. I actually think it's a great mechanic, but it's definitely made my life harder. So I left the cart near the copper deposit and started looking for another solution. The one thing I hated, even back when I first tried this game, was the raft. My first idea was to put a chest on it. Apparently, you can't do that. So then I thought I'd sail over to the mining area and somehow load the cart onto it instead. The problem is that I still refuse to watch guides on how boats works in Valheim. I want to figure things out for myself. Unfortunately, that decision backfired. The next 15 minutes were incredibly frustrating. No matter what I tried, the raft just wasn't cooperating. By the end of it, I was so annoyed that I decided to destroy the raft and hope that the next boat would be significantly better. So it was back to square one. The cart was once again my only option, and I decided not to think about boats for a while. Back at the cart, I came up with a new plan. Instead of loading it to the absolute limit, I would reduce the weight and use my stamina to help pull it. It seemed like running gave a bit more pulling power, so that became the new strategy. To be fair, it was actually working. I was making decent progress, slowly dragging everything back towards the base. Then I thought to myself that it was strange. So far, I hadn't run into a troll or a bear during this trip. And then, of course, Valheim heard me. Standing directly in my path was a supposedly very rare troll, and not far away from him was a bear. At that point, I was convinced that the game was taking the piss. The troll eventually aggroed onto me, so I had no choice but leave the cart behind. To make things even worse, the troll immediately started smashing the area around it, including the workbench I had placed down specifically to repair the cart if needed. That was the moment I finally decided I had enough. I wanted to find out exactly how difficult these trolls were to kill. In most games and stories, trolls regenerate, unless you use fire, so my brilliant plan was simple. Go home, craft a huge stack of fire arrows, and go troll hunting. So off I went. I found my first troll, and to be fair, the fight was going pretty well. A couple of grey dwarfs joined in, a few boars decided they wanted to be involved. Nothing too serious. Then another troll showed up. And the bear wasn't far away either. At this point, it felt like every creature in the Black Forest had received an invitation to this fight. Managing my stamina was becoming a nightmare. Eventually, I managed to kill the first troll. Then I died. At that point, I wasn't even angry anymore. I was determined. I was coming back for the second troll. This had become personal. On my return, the bear joined the fight, along with every other annoying little creature in the area. Honestly, if worms would exist in Valheim, they probably would have joined as well. You would think that if these creatures accidentally hit each other, they would turn hostile towards one another. Nope. Apparently, everybody had agreed that I was the problem. The bear eventually killed me, but by then the second troll was already badly injured, so I ran back once again and finally finished it off. 2 trolls down. At least all the suffering wasn't completely pointless. I finally recovered my cart, which somehow survived all the chaos, and dragged it back to the base. While I was there, I started building walls around my settlement. By this point, I had already experienced 2 raid events in only a few in-game days, so improving the defenses felt like a priority. After looting them, I discovered that troll armor offers defensive stats that are surprisingly close to the bronze armor. That made the decision easy. I crafted a set of troll armor and decided it would do the job perfectly for now. From that point onwards, every troll I came across became a target. I also got my revenge on the bear. The bear was finally dead. And honestly, that felt almost as satisfying as killing the trolls. With the trolls dealt with, and the bear finally out of the picture, I decided it was time to try something completely different. I had collected a bunch of seeds during my travels, so I thought I'd give farming a go. I planted some carrots and hoped for the best. At the same time, I built a new enclosure for the boars. After what happened during the raid, I wanted something a little stronger to keep them safe while I worked on taming them. Of course, while I was busy doing that, I spotted another troll wandering around in the distance. At this point, trolls had become less of a terrifying threat and more of an inconvenience. So naturally, that troll had to die as well. With the farm slowly getting established and the base becoming more secure, I started thinking about the next big objective, the Elder. I still need to figure out how I was actually going to get there. By now, I had unlocked the next boat, and after my disastrous experience with the raft, I was hoping this one would be a little better. To be fair, it was. I was slowly starting to understand how sailing worked. That doesn't mean I suddenly like boats though. They're still a pain, just slightly less of a pain than before. Around this time, I also unlocked portals. Now, when I first built one, I quickly realized something very important. A portal by itself doesn't actually do anything. Who would have thought that a portal needs another portal to connect it? So it was time for another adventure. My goal was to travel towards the Elder's location and find a suitable place to build a forward operating base, complete with a portal and somewhere safe to rest before the boss fight. After a bit of searching, I came across an abandoned house in the meadows. It wasn't too far away from the Elder's altar, and more importantly, it was quiet. That was good enough for me. I repaired the building, placed down a portal, and turned it into a temporary base of operation. Now all that was left was preparing for the fight itself. Thankfully, I already had the materials that needed to summon the Elder. Unfortunately, I also made a classic mistake. While scouting the area around the boss arena, I spotted a troll. The troll wasn't particularly close to the altar, so I thought to myself, you can stay there. I'll deal with you after the boss. There was also a bear nearby, but bears hadn't caused me nearly as many problems as trolls had, so I wasn't too worried about it. Looking back, this was probably a mistake. A very obvious mistake. Luring the bear away at that time seems a perfectly reasonable decision. Eventually, I felt ready. I sat down beside the fire and waited for the morning. There was no point starting a major boss fight in the middle of the night if I could avoid it. Once the sun came up, I made my offering and summoned the Elder. And just like that, the fight began. To be honest, things were going surprisingly well at first. I was keeping my distance, managing my stamina, and landing shots consistently. For a brief moment, I thought I actually knew what I was doing. Then the obvious happened. The troll joined the fight. The bear joined the fight. Greator started appearing. At that point, it felt less like a boss battle and more like the entire forest had decided to declare war on me. I'm not even going to include the audio of the live commentary from that fight because there was a lot of swearing involved, and understandably so. Eventually, I died. The moment it happened, I immediately realized what the problem was. I should have cleared everything around the arena before starting the fight. I knew it, and yet I ignored my own advice. So after returning, I dealt with the troll first. Only then did I go back and finish the boss. Or more accurately, I may have cheesed the boss a little bit. But a win is a win, and that's all that matters. Once the elder was finally defeated, it was time to collect my well-earned trophy. After everything that happened, the mining, the raids, the car disaster, the boat disaster, the trolls, the bears, and all the running around, it felt good to finally achieve the goal I'd set at the start of this episode. The second boss was down. Another step closer to completing Valheim. All that remained was to head home, place the trophy where it belonged, and prepare for whatever challenge comes next. And with that, this episode comes to an end. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode, where we will begin to prepare to hunt down the third boss, hopefully with fewer trolls. Although knowing this game, I wouldn't count on it.